Record here and locally. Catching breath, of course. So welcome to a brand new episode of No Hacks Marketing Podcast. Today, we're talking about something that we never discussed on this podcast before, web forms. They're always necessary, almost always bad, and usually pretty boring. So how can you change that? My guest today is Alan Lucas, Managing Director at Zuko Analytics, a person who knows a thing or two about optimizing web forms. Alan, welcome to the podcast. Pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to hear that. So before we start talking about Zuko and fixing web forms, I have sort of an icebreaker question. How do you feel about reCAPTCHA?
It's a funny one because we do use reCAPTCHA on our forms. It's a bad user experience, but it's when, I know from previous companies I've worked on, it's a balance between the user experience and then getting spammed on your back end. So, the products are getting better and it's getting, but it's still always an issue. No one likes to try and work out whether there's a traffic light in, 2 miles down the road in the picture. So it's kind of a necessary evil. We've got a whole blog on this piece on our website, but it's typically we do use it, so we can't we can't say anything, but we try and hide it and make it as easy as possible. So make it all embed it deep and don't do it if you don't have to. But it's a tricky one, but it exists for a reason.
Necessary evil is probably the best way. The reason I asked about this and the reason I really have a problem with it is just the bloat and the weight it adds to the page. It is a massive library that will kill your performance and your speed, like no doubt about that. But if it's necessary, okay, just that people need to know about what else it brings with it. So let me ask you about you. How did you get involved with form analytics? That is a very, very specific thing to be working with. It's not web analytics and stuff like that. This is forms and nothing but forms, right? With Zuko.
Yes, no, that's true. So you're talking about me personally or Zuko?
I'm talking about you personally. Yes.
So me personally, it's slightly different to Zuko. So, my background is not optimization. I worked for about 12 years in advertising and media. So, it's related and it's targeting, it's getting conversions through, I worked, across all media, including digital. So it was related. So I did that and I kind of got to a point where I wanted to do something different. So I went away and did an MBA at Manchester Business School, included a stint at Google there, again, more tech. I came out of that and I immediately started working for a venture capital firm. So we were investing in digital and marketing companies in the northwest of England. So very much involved in tech from there. And then, kind of came to a point where our investing period was over. So it was all about monitoring. So I decided to move across to the tech side, the client side. So I moved across firstly to an AI company, then to a digital health company. And then the opportunity arose for Zuko, which kind of meshed my tech skills, my small business skills, and my marketing skills, and it kind of was the perfect opportunity. So I didn't know huge amounts of forms at the time, but obviously had discussions when we were looking at conversion rates for the things in my previous lives. So I kind of ended up there, not by accident, because kind of my skill set led me to it, but it wasn't deliberate on my part.
Right. And what about Zuko? What is the origin story of Zuko?
So origin story of Zuko is obviously the original name of still the name of the company is Formissimo, which was created about 2014, 2015, off the back of a lot of pain. Forms are still bad, but back then they're even worse. So it was pretty obvious that there was no product really on the marketplace at that point that dealt with forms. So the founders looked and said, okay, what can we do? So that's where Formissimo, the first generation product, developed. And basically the idea being that you kind of identify when, where, and why users are dropping off forms. So you can create the hypotheses to test and improve your forms and ultimately improve your conversion rate. So Zuko came about out of a lot of pain. Formissimo came out of a lot of pain. Zuko is the second generation product, which was introduced 3 years ago now. and kind of we transitioned from Formissimo to Zuko by accident, because Zuko originally started as an enterprise product only, and Formissimo was retained as kind of a self-serve subscription product. But it quickly became clear that, well, Zuko was so much better in every way than the previous product. So why are we maintaining an old product? So we then transitioned Zuko to be available to everyone. And then it became, well, okay, well, what's the name? So in the end, we transitioned the name, right, customer-facing name, to Zuko. Essentially, that's why it happened. There was a few issues with Formissimo as well, that people were always spelling it wrong and couldn't pronounce it. So it was great, and then it talked about forms, but people would misspell it and wouldn't be able to get to your website. So that was an issue. So hence we are with Zuko with our second generation, and our strategy remains to be the absolute best at form analytics. There's lots of tools out there that do 5 or 6 different things decently well, but we want to be the best at one thing. And so for businesses that are serious about getting their forms right, we're the go-to tool.
A specialized tool will always beat the universal analytics or whatever else it is. You mentioned that the forms were worse, like 2014, 2015. And one thing that changed since then is, and I'm in Sweden, Klarna is the big thing here. The IFrame checkouts where you don't get to control anything. Do you think that's a good thing or bad thing for web forms?
Well, I think, the general piece is around single sign-on. I think, and again, we've written about this in a lot of our guides. Generally, if all you're looking to do is convert someone, it's a good thing, because they are, Facebook sign-on, LinkedIn sign-up. It's simple, it's easy. People, if they're already signed up to Facebook, and they have less concerns about what's happening with their data. Having said that, obviously, they probably should be more concerned, because these guys then know Facebook knows that what you've signed up for and what you're doing, etc. So, but people don't necessarily register that. So I think generally, if you're looking at simple form, but the forms we deal with, you're often looking at a lot more detailed information. You're looking at financial information, and looking at personal answers that people give, and that's not necessarily stored on Facebook. So if you're just looking to register for a trial, click here as your Facebook, then that's fine. It does well, depending on your audience. I'll have to caveat that, because if you're looking at an older audience, they may not have that. So you always have to offer a standardized login as well. But I think that they have their place for the right product.
Right, and that was 2014. The bad forms, now it's better. But 2022, we still have plenty, like I'd say majority of forms online are ranging from bad to terrible.
Yeah.
Why is that the case? Like, when will it be better?
Okay, well, there's 2 answers to this, but I suppose if you look back to the midst of time, why are forms online bad in the first place? And it's probably because forms before the internet were bad. So I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but you'd get a form, you'd send off, someone would put a form in a post, you'd spend ages doing it, there'd be 50 fields to fill out, you'd post it back, and etc. But because there was no way around it, people kind of got used to it. Again, it's the monopoly thing. It's like, okay, what are you going to do? You've got no option. So kind of when forms started coming online, it was just, let's port the form across. And technology wasn't great, etc. So that's the first reason that forms were bad. But why haven't they got as much better much quickly? And I think that kind of ties more into how, let's face it, forms are not sexy. People, how many people sit in an optimization meeting, say, let's do forms. Oh, no, let's do a homepage. Let's look at the advertising optimization. Let's do this. They don't think, okay, let's get down to that last piece of information, which determines where a user is giving you some personal information. It's quite a commitment. Let's look at that. And it's something that we get frustrated with, because we want to see a mentality shift to let's make forms better. And there's a lot of places do get it. Right. But there's a lot that don't, because it's the last thing. It's just simple. There's lots of self-serve. Let's set up a form. It's the same reason that surveys are bad. No one really thinks about it. Just let's ask the questions. It's not difficult. I can give you that information, but they don't think of it from the user perspective. What telephone number being the prime example. People just say, yeah, telephone number. Why wouldn't they give a telephone number? But it's probably one of the biggest reasons for dropout in a lot of forms, particularly e-commerce. because people hate giving it because they just believe they're going to get spammed with phone calls. But people don't think that because it's just a form, you know, like a paper form. Just put your phone number down. How difficult is that? It's not difficult. Everyone knows their phone number. But mentally, there's that block there. And just the attention, I say, and agencies are guilty of this. And I say we have a lot of agency clients, but so I say not necessarily an experimentation CRO agency, but the broader digital agencies, they want to focus on the nice, sexy campaigns, driving more traffic, making the web homepage better, but they don't necessarily want to do the nitty gritty because it
makes for a nicer presentation of what
exactly
you want for the client, right?
Exactly,
you have this fancy landing page and all that.
Yeah.
So how do you get started with form optimization? Sign up for Zuko, of course, but in general, like, what is the approach? What is the mindset of starting?
So the mindset is obviously you need to identify the issues. Well, firstly, you need to identify, have you got a problem? At the end of the day, every form can be optimized. So you need data. And now whether that's from GA, whether that's from Zuko, or wherever it's from, you need to make sure you have data. So firstly, like, what's your conversion rate overall? Now, we often get asked, is my conversion rate good or bad? Of course, any optimizer knows you don't know, because we have benchmarks across industries which you can look at, take it with a pinch of salt, but at least you can see, okay, in the finance industry for an inquiry form, its conversion rate is this, but obviously every form is different. So you at least get an idea of what the potential is in terms of, if you improve what you could get to, I'll say with a pinch of salt. But then you need to know where are the issues within your form. And, obviously you can look at, user recordings, heat maps, etc., do those sort of things, see how users are doing it. Or you could use a form analytics tool like Zuko, which uses a data-based approach to say, okay, where are the places that people are dropping off? So that's what you need to do. So you'll look at that. First thing, you look at the basics. So you will look at, okay, what are the abandonment rates at a particular field, both in terms of volume, so your sheer numbers for improvement, but also the rate, percentage rate, because often what you see is there's fields in forms that are not shown to everyone. So the conditional fields, so they might represent a small proportion of your overall abandonments, but they actually have a high abandonment rate if there's a high percentage of people who drop out when they do that. So you need to make sure you're looking at all of that. You need to look at areas of friction, so which areas are people going back to, and also where are people, how long are people taking on it. Having said that, the raw figure isn't necessarily the most important thing. What we find when you're looking at, you're digging deeper, you need to look at the difference in behavior between people who complete and people who abandon. So as an example, let's say we have a financial form and there's a gross income field. And what we can see is that 20% of people overall go back to that field to have to make a correction. So they fill it in, they get asked it, they move on and they come back to correct it. Is 20% good or bad? We get asked, well, I don't know, but what you can do is segment your audience. And so you may have the instance where, okay, 35% of people who abandon the form ultimately have to go back to it. Then, but the figure is only 10% for those who complete. So you can say, okay, well, there's obviously a correlation here between abandonment and having to go back. So you break it down into that. So you can see, you can identify where your issues are. You can also look at other data. If you set up error message tracking, you can see what error messages are tracking. And again, correlate those between abandonment or not, because sometimes you get an error message, in an email address, or you've forgotten you've forgotten the .com. Okay, well, I can fix that. It doesn't, it doesn't correlate with abandonment, but then you might have others that do, because people, can't, because there's a validation error. As an example, phone numbers or credit cards are often, your validation, if you put it in a certain way, people don't know, put dashes in, spaces in, those sort of things, and people just get frustrated with that and abandon. So you can work out that those are your issues, as well as also the one thing we also do, well, we might come onto this later, is also looking at behavior around submit button, because often, there's a whole subsection of your audience who will spend a lot of time filling out the form, click the submit button, it fails, probably because of error messages. when you're like, okay, why is that? And then
Right.
if you have an analytical tool which enables you to say, okay, after they've clicked the submit, what do they do next? Typically, because they'll go back to the fields they're having problems with. So again, that enables you. That's another very good way of seeing how people, where people are struggling. So you identify those. That's your first point one.
And that's something you mentioned as we were discussing the episode, as we were preparing for it. Some of the examples of changes that delivered the biggest uplift. And it's what you just mentioned, inline validation. Of course, if I cannot guess which format for the phone number you want, I'll give up at some point. And also what happens after submit, like the error message, and I need to know. So what are some other examples of things that you've noticed get significant lift as a
I said the biggest one is you mentioned it was inline validation, specifically telling people at the right time. So we've had examples of forms where you don't get any error messages until you click the submit button, and then the error messages are right back at the top of the form and you can't find it, and then you've got to go back down again to find out what the thing is, and you don't know what the problem is. Error messages in general will come onto, because again, that's a big one, but inline validation is sort of when you trigger it. So if you trigger it at the time and you tell people, not only have they got it wrong, but have they got it right? There's a massive change in forms. Can be stressful. You see that red. It's like when you're at school, you remember the big red pen. You got it wrong, bad, and the stress. And on one incident isn't bad, but then when you get multiple ones, it builds and builds before people might just leave. So putting the validation in immediately. So typically the best time is when they've moved from one field to the next one. You tell them straight away. So before they've started the next field, because you don't want to do it too early, because again, everyone hates saying, "Oh, you've not completed your phone number." Like, I'm in the middle of it. So that's a big one for us. We see, well, there was a famous study by Wroblewski who tested it and found on average a 22% uplift using inline validation, and that's kind of what we see. If you're doing nothing, you can easily see a 10 to 30% uplift if you've already got a bad setup already.
Wow. So
that's always the number one we look at. The other areas are related to that, but they're just around error messages and instructional microcopy. I'm going to group them together because it's all part of that, and then the validation process is like, okay, again, we often see forms where you get a message, your answer is invalid. Okay, well, how is it invalid? Why is it invalid? Tell me. And so again, you see a big uplift of, okay, if you can change that to something more useful, okay, you're just as a simple example, your answer is invalid because you've got a .com, or you've missed the @ in your email address, to potentially more sophisticated things. And then also, if you can add a layer of suggestion, and again, I'll use an email as an example. If someone puts in gmail.com, you say, "Oh, did you mean Gmail? Click here." Oh, okay, yeah. And that's you will see big lifts around that, and linked to that is the microcopy. If you're telling them already, again, I'll use the password field as a simple example. Often what you'll see just says password. Okay, put a password in. It's only after that they've entered the password, so you need 10 characters, one special character, etc. It's like, well, I've just given you a password. Why did you do that to me? Tell me straight away. And being upfront. And so that also falls into the big managing expectations. And again, this is probably another area where we see a big uplift for certain, travel, finance, etc. If you require certain information of people, social security numbers, passport numbers, driver's license, if you're not telling them, and you only tell them when they get to that field, then you're going to see a big bit of dropout, because people will have to go, "Oh my, where's my passport? I don't know." They go away, they search for 5 minutes, they come back. And worst case scenarios, they've been timed out, so they've lost all their information. So you see a lot of that sort of thing. So those are kind of the bigger practical examples of improved stuff. And then probably the other area is kind of around mobile optimization. If you're not optimizing for mobile, making sure it renders well, making sure that you're putting the right HTML in there, so the right keyboard comes up. All those sort of things is, again, another potential big uplift, depending on what your audience is one that we see. Just improving that can give you a big uplift.
Right. And mobile is really a good example, because not only just getting the right keyboards and everything, but it's also about the context. I don't have as much time. I don't have as much attention. So does it make sense to make mobile forms shorter, eliminate the unnecessary field? I guess you need to eliminate the unnecessary fields on desktop as well. Like, why ask for things that you don't really need? So I think mobile optimization, and just to be clear, Zuko does the segmentation, mobile and desktop.
Yes, yeah,
of course, absolutely. I think that's really the biggest struggle for me with forms online. If I'm on my phone, I might leave the tab open so I remember it when I get to my computer, or I may forget if the form is very demanding. Okay, so Zuko is, we said it's a specialized tool. So what is the difference, and what is the problem with the black box analytics tools and using them for forms? Something like, let's stick to universal analytics because it's still alive. It has like 13 more months until it dies, and it's what everyone's using. So what's the problem with using that for form analytics?
So the issue with universal analytics, well, the basic issue is it's not designed for forms. So at its top level, what you can do is you can see, like you say, the black box. Okay, you can see how many people reach a form page and how many people convert. You don't know what's happening within it. Now, you can spend a lot of time, expensive developer time, trying to hack together a framework which gives you some information. So, tagging up fields for interactions and maybe time and that sort of thing. And you'll get a basic thing, but you've spent half a day doing it. When your form changes, you've got to redo it. It's hard to maintain. Why do that when you can just get a specialist tool where it's 2 tags done? Okay, it's been designed to pull it in for you. And so it's aside from the fact you've got greater, more in-depth reports, it is just actually the pain of doing it and getting it right. Just because it's free, as some people think it's free, but obviously its time isn't free. So people that's why people gravitate to it.
Right. And how does Zuko work? What is the implementation like? You said just add a tag, 2 tags.
Yeah. Actually. So the basic tag is, you have 2 tags. One is on form load.
Okay.
And then one is on successful completion. So typically the thank you page.
Okay.
So Zuko then pulls in every interaction with a form element in between those. You might need to spend a little bit of time relabeling depending on what your developers have done, because Zuko pulls in the HTML. So if your developers have called a field X125796, which they do, they do. So you would then just have to, in Zuko, rename it to, address field or whatever it may be.
Of course.
But hopefully your developers have set it up so you can read it and go, okay, I know what that field is. It's not a problem.
So that's how easy it is. Any interaction, any clicks, any blurs and focuses on the form fields, Zuko detects that automatically. There's no need to do events like in Google Analytics or any crazy.
No,
like
I mean, if you want to build on it, there's if you want to build custom events, you can push those in. Right. So some error messaging and etc. Or if someone clicks on a particular button, there's a little bit more work to do there. Or if you want to set up certain audience segmentation, it's built to be flexible, so you can build your own audience segmentation, but obviously there's a little bit more work there. Out of the box, you look at new versus returning users, device type, browser family, and also we have a standardized tag if you want to be tracking traffic source as well. But again, you can get more granular if you want to.
That sounds simple. Sounds really, really easy.
Well, it's been designed to be easy. That's the kind of point, because we know these things are difficult. No one's got the time to do it. So
that's a fair point. And there's a really good product overview video. I will link to that page in the description of the episode. Great. It's like a minute 40 seconds, something like that. And it just really tells you, is that you talking on that video?
It's not me. It's one of the founders. He's much more well-spoken than I am.
So. Oh, come on. But I will link to that page in the description, because it tells you everything you need to know about Zuko and how simple it is, shows you the report, shows you everything. So to people listening to this who are not familiar with Zuko, just check that link in the description. I think you will learn everything you need to know. Now, on to my next question is, which businesses can benefit most from Zuko? What kind of forms? You mentioned some 3 criteria for the forms.
Yeah, so this kind of say a combination of 3 criteria of, means you'll probably get the most out of Zuko or any form analytics tool. The first one is complex forms, because obviously if you've got a form with lots of questions or difficult questions, there's much more opportunity to get it wrong than if you've just got a contact form which is an email address. You might mess it up once, but you're not going to mess it up twice because it's relatively simple to do. Whereas if you've got a big long form asking for personal data, it's trickier. Second thing is high cost of customer acquisition. Again, with any optimization, your return on investment is going to be higher if you've got a high cost, if you can reduce the cost of customer acquisition. And then the third thing is linked to that, and that's customer lifetime value. Right. So they're both kind of interlinked in the return on investment thing. You improve your conversion, you're going to get more back. So those three things, and when it comes to industries, you probably won't be surprised to know that our biggest sector far and away is financial. So insurance, banking, credit cards, forex, those sort of things, because they necessarily ask difficult questions and financial questions of the user. So it's very important to get right. So that's our number one sector. But we also have, gambling is an interesting one. We have a big gaming and gambling sector, and that's probably not necessarily because the forms are that complex, although there can be regulatory things in certain markets, but it's to do with the cost of acquisition and the lifetime value of a customer. So there's going to be a big return. Then we also have travel, education. Education one is one that's classic complex forms, big long ones. And e-commerce as well, obviously, because there's a lot of e-commerce out there that use checkouts. And while there's a lot of formulaic checkouts there that work quite well, there's always little wrinkles. Should you put a coupon code? Should you reveal it? Is that going to drive people away because they go somewhere else to try and find a coupon? That sort of thing. So those are the areas that we have, as well as agencies, obviously, who look after their clients. So those are the kind of sectors that Zuko deals with.
Right, but more complex the form is, of course, higher the need for an analytics tool.
Absolutely,
just a logical order. So how does it work with multi-page forms? That's what you would call a complex form, right?
Yeah, so I mean, technically Zuko's been designed to do that, or it's the same process. You put one tag on the first load and one tag on the completion page, and as long as it's all on the same base domain, then Zuko will just work it through as if it was a single page form. And yeah, I mean, we do a lot of multi-page forms because they tend to perform better than single page forms because just because of that chunking of information works well.
And does it work with client side generated? Let's say you have something like React to generate the form, or does it have to be server side generated?
No, it works with clients. It pretty much works with every form, as long as you can get the code onto it. If it's an IFrame, you just need to be able to make sure you can put it on the IFrame. So if you've got a third party that won't let you put code on, then obviously you might struggle.
But you're not going to be able to optimize that anyway. So
no, exactly.
The
so
IFrame form.
It's generally 95% plus of forms it works on. The only time, you have to do a little more setup is if someone's built a form that's not a form. So you built like lots of images. So it's not an HTML form. You've been lots of images and you click on this image and that gives you the answer and that sort of thing. Technically, Zuko can still handle it. You just need to add overrides to the individual elements. But because it's not a form element, we don't automatically pull in every image. So
Right. And I have one final question. And this one is from my friend, Brent Tutoras, who's digital marketing strategist and managing partner at Search Engine Journal.
Yeah.
This is about psychology of forms. Like, what are the differences with psychology and persuasion with the forms, designing the form, with the decision being made when you compare a single person decision, like a simple purchase, or one that requires a potential discussion amongst a couple, like buying a car, buying a house? Like, what is the difference in psychology of those forms?
So that's an interesting question. I'm not considered it fully before, but I guess it's kind of typically the way businesses do it is if it's a considered decision, you probably actually make your form much more simpler because all you want to do is a lead capture piece, because you need to capture the interest and it's a multi-stage because there's discussions to be had. So from psychology, it's not just about the form, it's about everything. So you've just got to drive people to the form, you register interest, and then you have a good CRM to make sure they're doing that. And then you might have a follow-up form for the booking or whatever it may be. Whereas a single person form, you can, again, depending on the product sector, you're probably looking you can get away with, more information, because people will just explore the form and go through and do it. Whereas if no one's going to make a decision on day one, and you know that, then yeah, even more reason not to ask for more information. You ask for less information and have a good follow-up.
I think that makes perfect sense. And that is a wrap for this episode. Two things that I learned. Recapture is a necessary evil. You just confirmed what I felt about it. And then Zuko, to anyone listening to this, just go and sign up. You have a trial plan, right?
Yeah, free trial.
Free trial where people can go sign up, have a look at the interface, connect their form, and just see what the tool looks like. I've seen it. I've signed up. I haven't really used it to analyze the form, but it's better than Google Analytics or whatever else most people are using. So I would just recommend go there and sign up. The link will be in the description. Alan, I want to thank you for this conversation. I really, really love this tool. I love the specialized tool that it is. And thank you for being on the podcast. To everyone listening, thank you. Consider rating or reviewing the episode, and I will talk to you next week.
Thank you very much.